This is the lesson for February 3rd. First thing I want you to do is look at mental math. Let's try a couple of these big X's. Remember that the purpose is to find two numbers here and here, which multiply to the top number and add to the bottom number. How you do it is you think of any two numbers that multiply to 30. Let's try 3 and 10. 3 times 10. Do they multiply? Do they add to 11? The answer is no, they add to 13. They don't work. So we need to find two numbers that are closer together so that when we add them, we get a smaller number. We try again. It's guess, check, and revise. 5 and 6 are closer together. 5 times 6 is 30. 5 plus 6 is 11. We found them. Let's try this one now. We need two numbers that multiply to 30 and add to 31. Let's try 30 and 1. Here we go. Now we have some negatives. If we have a negative down here, how can we get two numbers that add to a negative number but multiply to a positive number? You can see that they're both going to be negative. Sometimes it's hard to think about what the number is going to be, but in this case it's not too hard. We've got negative 10 and negative 3. Let's say that you can't think of two numbers that add to negative 17. Here's a trick. You can split this into primes. This is 3 times 10, and 10 is 2 times 5. So really, this is just 2 times 3 times 5. Okay. So all the possible factors of 30 are going to be, we could have a 1 on one side and 2 times 3 times 5, 30 on the other side. We could have 2 by itself, which would leave 15 on the other side. We could have 3 by itself, which would leave 2 times 5, which is 10. If we start, we could have 5 by itself, which would leave 2 times 3, which is 6. And hopefully you can see that those are all the factors. If we start grouping them by 2, then we're just doing repeats of what we've already done. These are all the possibilities. So if we, of course they could be negative. So if we want to add to negative 17, we look up here, 2 plus 15 is 17. So there's my answer. Okay. All right. Hopefully you remember that there are two ways to factor this. I am just going to go over the area model today. We put our terms into our area model. We factor the greatest common factor from each column in each row. So I end up with x, I end up with 3, I end up with x, I end up with 2. So this is the same thing as x plus 3 times x plus 2. Get ready for our lesson. Can we factor this big X? This one has an X squared in it. We're going to put an X here and here. Let's see, 45. That's 9 times 5. 9 is 3 times 3. So we've got 3 times 3 times 5. How can we split this up so that it adds to negative 18? I could do 15 and 3. 3x, 15x, they both have to be negative. All right, we are factoring trinomials today. Trinomials have 3 terms. You can see here that we've labeled the coefficients of this trinomial. The 2 is A. We're going to call this our A. The 9, we're going to call our B. And the 10, we're going to call our C. Okay? When we go to factor this, usually we need 4 terms to go in our area model. We know that the first term goes right here. The last term goes here, but we usually need two middle terms and we only have one. That's the whole reason we've been learning about the big X. The X helps us to split this middle term into two middle terms. Here's how it works. It looks a little like magic right now. If you would like to come after school to tutoring, I can show you why it makes sense, why it works. Okay? Here's what we do though. We take the A coefficient and the C coefficient. A-tick. It's a good way to remember it. A times C goes on the top. That becomes a 20. In the basement, we put our B coefficient. That's a 9. Now we're going to split the middle term. Okay? We're going to see how we split this 9, or this 9x. Here's how it works. Let's see, two numbers that multiply to 20 and add to 5. I'm going to say 4 and 5. That works. So I can go up here and I can say this is 4x and this is 5x. You know what, I'm going to go ahead and put x squared and x and x and x here. Okay. Now I go ahead, so the middle terms go here. So it's like an attic, the middle story, and the basement. I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor. Here's an x, 2. I'm going to do a 2x here. I'm going to do a 5. So I end up with 2x squared plus 9x plus 10 equals 2x plus 5 times x plus 2. Let me just double check. Did I do my multiplication right here? I always check just to make sure I didn't make mistakes. All right, let's try this one as an example. Here's the trinomial. In the attic, we put the first term times the last term. So that's 15x squared. In the basement, we put the middle term. That's 8x. I'm going to put an x here and an x here. I have to split 8x. So I'm thinking that 15 is 3 times 5, and 3 plus 5 is 8. So I've got 3 and 5. I drop down here, I've got my x squared. I've got my 15 already. My middle terms become 3x and 5x. One more example. Okay. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to start filling in the box, the area model. I put a 5x squared here. I put a negative 2 here. In my x up here, in my attic, I've got 5x squared times negative 2. That's negative 10x squared. In the basement, I've got negative 3x. I'm going to split that. The x's go here. Negative 10 is just 2 times 5. And I want it to be more negatives than positives. So there's my split. So I put negative 5x here. It doesn't actually matter which middle term you put where. I find the greatest common factor, 5x, 2x. Ooh, there's no common factor here, so I just leave it as 1. But the sign has to match the box that it's closest to. So I've got 5x plus 2 times x minus 1. Let me do one more for you. Here's my polynomial. Let me start filling in as much of my box as I can. X squared, negative 32. I know that my middle terms are going to have an X. I'm going to put it like this so I only have to worry about numbers up here. Well, I'm going to do x squared times negative 32. I get negative 32x squared. In the basement, I get 4x. Okay, 32 is 4 times 8, right? That's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. How can I split that so it adds up? Well, 4 times 8 would work. 4x and 8x. And I'm going to end up with 4x here and 8x here. Greatest common factor is an x. Greatest common factor is a 4. I leave it positive because the box it's closest to is positive. Greatest common factor here is x. Greatest common factor here is 8. Oh, I did make a mistake. Look. This needs to be negative. So here's my negative sign. Now it works out. Let's go back. When I do the greatest common factor this way, it's 4, but I put a negative so that the box matches. You know how I caught that mistake? Because I checked my multiplication and it wasn't working out right. X plus 8 times x minus 4. All right, good luck with this.